Welcome to Life Stories, where we dive into the journeys of those who rise above challenges and reclaim their worth. Today's story is about Emily, a woman who spent 15 years building her career at Innovatech Solutions, only to be pushed out by corporate greed. But what seemed like the end of her journey was only the beginning of something greater. With a groundbreaking patent in her hands and a determination to prove her value, Emily sets out on a path that will redefine her future. Let's begin this incredible journey today. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more inspiring stories. It was a day like any other. Or so I thought. I sat in my small office at Innovatech Solutions, the company I had poured my heart and soul into for over 15 years. The hum of the fluorescent lights above, the sound of the keyboards clacking from the next room, these noises had become my comfort, my routine. But little did I know, this would be my last day at the company I had helped build from the ground up. It was late morning when Rachel Lawson, the director of operations, and Sarah from HR walked into my office. I had seen Rachel's name on the calendar, but I hadn't thought much of it. There was always some project, some report that required attention. But when Rachel and Sarah walked in, there was an unmistakable tension in the air, a heaviness that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Their perfectly crafted expressions of corporate professionalism gave nothing away, but their eyes told a different story. I had seen this look before, on other people, not long before they were let go. Emily, Rachel began, her voice steady but carrying a barely concealed note of satisfaction. I'm afraid we have some news. She sat down across from me, and Sarah slid a manila folder across the table. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. The severance package was as predictable as it was painful. 2 weeks for every year of service. Continued health coverage for 3 months. A list of career counseling resources that, frankly, I would never use. I accepted the folder, nodded, and remained calm. I didn't want them to see how deeply this cut. I had always prided myself on my professionalism, and I wasn't about to break down in front of them. They expected tears, perhaps anger, but they would not get it from me. The company is moving in a new direction, Rachel continued, her tone now more confident as she explained the restructuring. We're consolidating the research division under the product development team. She paused for a moment, looking at me with what I assumed was meant to be a sympathetic gaze. I took in her words, and though they stung, I nodded thoughtfully. I understood. They didn't want me. Not anymore. I was a 55-year-old woman in an industry that prized youth above all else, where experience was often seen as a liability rather than a strength. My age had been my silent adversary for years, but now, it seemed, it had finally caught up with me. I looked at the folder in my hands. 2 weeks for every year of service. A standard severance package. Nothing extraordinary, but also nothing that would soften the blow. I had worked here for over a decade and a half. And yet it seemed that in the end, I was little more than a statistic, a line item in a spreadsheet. I completely understand, I said, keeping my voice steady, professional, and calm. They seemed to expect a different reaction, but all I could do was agree with their decision. After all, this was business. It was nothing personal. They didn't understand that I had been expecting this moment for weeks. Ever since I had accidentally received that email thread a month ago. The one where they discussed plans to phase me out. To push me out before they could secure my intellectual property. Before they could steal the algorithm that I had poured my life into. I kept my emotions in check. They didn't need to know that I had already prepared for this moment. That I had already filed a patent for my distributed processing algorithm on my own time. Using my personal equipment. That while they thought they were pushing me out of the company, I was already planning my next move. Rachel continued speaking, her voice taking on a more confident tone as she discussed the logistics of my departure. You'll need to clean out your desk by Friday, she said, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she glanced down at the folder. We'll need your keycard, laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon. That last part stung the most. My team, my brilliant team of engineers, whom I had personally recruited and mentored over the years. The same team that had helped me develop the very algorithm that now powered Innovate's flagship product, an algorithm that accounted for a large portion of the company's success. Yet, As I stood up from my chair, I knew that they, too, would be swept aside by the same corporate restructuring. Of course, I said, rising from my chair. I didn't want to show them how deeply hurt I was. Is there anything else? Rachel and Sarah exchanged a brief glance, as if they weren't sure what to make of my calm composure. Marjorie, the head of our, recovered first. That's all for now, she said. Thank you for handling this so professionally. I didn't say anything more. I simply nodded, gave them a polite smile, and left the room. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the glass-walled conference room where the executive team was meeting. Through the transparent barrier, I could see the CEO, Victor Lawson, gesturing animatedly at a PowerPoint presentation titled, Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Victor Lawson who had taken credit for my algorithm at last year's industry conference, referring to me only as one of our research team members. I didn't feel anger. No, there was something else inside me. A quiet satisfaction. They had underestimated me, and they would soon realize just how badly they had done so. It wasn't anger that fueled me, it was something far more powerful, a quiet, determined resolve. I had seen the writing on the wall long before they had made their move. The misdirected email thread, the discussions of the company's plans to restructure and streamline their operations, had all led me to one inevitable conclusion. This was the end of my time at Innovatech Solutions. But what they didn't know, what they could never have anticipated, was that I had already begun planning my exit long before their cold corporate meeting. I returned to my office, closed the door behind me, and immediately grabbed my personal phone from the drawer. The screen lit up with a text from Mark Sullivan, my longtime friend and now business partner. Mark had always respected my work and understood the value of my intellectual property. When I had confided in him about the growing tension at Innovatech, he had suggested that we take action before they could move against me. It's happening, I typed out, my fingers steady as I hit send. Friday is my last day. Almost immediately, the reply appeared on my screen. Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details. I smiled to myself as I looked at the calendar on my desk. Friday was indeed my last day. And on Monday, I would be stepping into a new chapter of my life. A chapter that would be far more rewarding and far less toxic than the one I had just left behind. I had long suspected that Innovatech had never fully respected the work I had done. But now, with the patent I had secretly filed just a month ago, they would learn the hard way just how valuable my contributions truly were. 3 months earlier, I had made a discovery that would change everything. I had learned, through a simple slip-up on their part, that Innovatech had never filed a patent for the distributed processing algorithm, the very core of the company's flagship product. When I had inquired about it, their legal team had claimed it was simply an oversight, assuring me that it would be handled immediately. But something didn't sit right with me. So, I took matters into my own hands. I had refined the algorithm on my personal time, using my own equipment, and those improvements were not covered by any of Innovatech's agreements with me. They were mine, and I knew that if I kept pushing forward, I could retain the rights to them. I worked quietly, documenting each step of the process, recording timestamps, and meticulously tracking every detail of the development. It wasn't until I stumbled across an internal strategy memo that I realized Innovatech's true intentions. They had planned to push me out before securing the patent. Knowing full well that intellectual property developed by employees typically belonged to the company. But they had underestimated me. While they were scheming behind my back, I had already filed for a patent under my name, independent of the company. And the best part? The patent was granted swiftly, thanks to Mark's connections with one of the top IP attorneys in the country. The legal groundwork had been laid, and the patent was mine. Innovatech would never have a claim on it. That evening, as I sat down for dinner with Mark, the weight of what I had accomplished settled on me. The documents for the exclusive licensing rights were ready. Soon, I would no longer be just another employee. I'd be the owner of one of the most valuable algorithms in the tech world. Mark slid the contract across the table, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Once you sign this, he said, Precision Systems will officially acquire the exclusive licensing rights to your patent. You'll be their chief innovation officer. And Innovatech, well, they'll have to pay the price for underestimating you. I picked up the pen, signing my name with a firm, confident motion. In that simple act, I had secured my future. I had protected my team. 2. I'd already spoken with Mark about offering positions to the engineers who had been part of my team at Innovatech. The ones who had helped me develop the algorithm. They deserved more than the cold exit they were about to receive. And I was determined to make sure they had a place at Precision Systems. Cheers to new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. To owning my value. Mark clinked his glass against mine, his grin wide with excitement. To owning your value, he echoed, his voice filled with admiration. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the path I had taken. It had not been an easy journey. Over the years, I had fought for recognition, for respect. I had watched as younger, less experienced colleagues took credit for my work, as the company that should have valued me instead looked past me. But now, with the patent safely in my hands and my future secured, I could finally breathe easy. I had done something for myself. For once, I wasn't going to let anyone steal what was rightfully mine. By Friday, I would say my final goodbyes to Innovatech, and by Monday, I would step into my new role at Precision Systems. The game had changed, and I was on the winning side. The days between my resignation and my new start at Precision Systems passed in a blur of mundane meetings and exit interviews. Despite knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss not of the job itself, but of the people who would soon feel the reverberations of my departure. As I packed up my office, I thought of my team, those brilliant engineers I had recruited, mentored, and worked alongside for years. They didn't deserve to be caught in the corporate fallout. But I knew that was exactly what was going to happen. By Thursday, rumors had begun to spread through the company like wildfire. Administrative assistants and junior developers alike gave me sympathetic glances as I walked down the hallways. Some of them had already come to me with awkward requests for LinkedIn recommendations. A quiet acknowledgement of my influence on their careers. Even if they had never fully understood my work. I didn't blame them, after all. It wasn't their fault they hadn't been a part of the bigger picture. I spent the next couple of days meticulously documenting every project, every password, every process, leaving behind a detailed transition document that I knew would become valuable once the reality of my absence set in. It wasn't kindness that made me do this, but strategy. I wanted to make sure that Innovatech couldn't claim that I hadn't acted in good faith. When they inevitably realized how indispensable I had been to the company's operations, there would be no question that I had given them everything I had. When I sat down for my final exit interview on Friday, Denise from HR moved through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of Innovatech Solutions? She asked, her voice clipped and formal. Of course, I replied, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my tone. Anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources, during company time. I emphasized the qualifiers, something I knew she wouldn't even notice as she checked the boxes. After all, Innovatech's legal team had failed to protect their own interests, and I wasn't going to help them now. I confirmed that I had taken nothing that belonged to the company. Which was true, after all. The patent I had filed was mine and mine alone. As I packed my personal items into a box, family photos, conference badges from the past decade, and the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I was leaving a place that had never truly valued me. And yet, in my departure, I had secured something that they could never take from me. As I walked past my team's workspace one last time, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. They had no idea what was coming. It wasn't their fault. They had always been brilliant. But they had been caught in the crossfire of corporate games they couldn't fully understand. They didn't know that within days, their careers would take a sudden, dramatic turn. I closed my office door for the last time. My keycard handed in, my belongings packed, and as I made my way to the exit, I passed by the glass-walled conference room one last time. Through the transparent walls, I could see the executive team in full meeting mode. including Victor Lawson, the CEO, who was furiously pointing at a PowerPoint presentation titled, Q3 Revenue Projections. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. There he was, the man who had taken credit for my work and presented my algorithm at last year's industry conference as if it were his own. As I walked past the conference room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. They didn't even know what was coming. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text message from Mark. "It's all in motion," he wrote. "By Monday, they'll be scrambling. Get ready." I couldn't help but smile. The tide had turned. I had anticipated this moment for weeks. And now, I was ready. Ready to start my new role. Ready to reclaim my value. And ready to show the world just how powerful innovation can be when it's recognized, protected, and appreciated. As I stepped outside Innovate's glass headquarters for the last time, I paused for a moment. I looked up at the towering building that had once felt like a home but now seemed like nothing more than a distant memory. It was over, and yet, in that moment, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. I was about to step into something bigger, something better. And Innovatech? Well, they would soon learn exactly what it meant to take someone like me for granted. As I settled into my new office at Precision Systems, everything felt different. It wasn't just the shiny new desk or the high-rise view. It was the feeling of being valued. Of being in a place where my ideas were not only welcomed but celebrated. The energy in the office was electric. The sense of purpose palpable. I had gone from being a faceless contributor in a company that had taken me for granted to being the chief innovation officer of one of the most promising tech firms in the industry. But the real triumph wasn't the title or the office, it was the recognition. My algorithm, the one that Innovatech had tried to claim as their own, was now mine. It was mine in every sense, in its development, in its impact, and in the legacy I was creating with it. Precision Systems embraced me as their own, giving me the space to refine the algorithm even further, pushing its capabilities to new heights. We were already seeing impressive results, efficiency improvements far beyond what anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, Innovatech was reeling from the loss. Their stock had plummeted, and the fallout from my departure had sent shockwaves through the company. Victor Lawson, the CEO who had once belittled my contributions, was scrambling to repair the damage. They had underestimated the value of the work I had done for them. And now they would pay the price. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about showing the world that innovation deserves to be recognized and that those who create it should never be overlooked. Thank you for following my story. If you've enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more life stories that inspire and empower.